as Greg said, I'm Al Flory, and this is one of my pieces here in the show. So, from 2014 to 2018, I was a member of a cooperative art gallery over on Alberta Street in Portland. And during this period, I developed a body of work dealing with small posters, 8.5 by 11, stapled to wooden electric and telephone poles. And what I liked about them was that the posters were man-made materials, but they were altered by Mother Nature, rain, snow, sunshine, etc., and also by other human activity, stapling other posters on top of them, sometimes tearing them, so forth. And all this created some interesting layering effects and also some interesting juxtapositions of images and messages. And so that's what this was about. Rather than talking more about that, since it isn't the major point, I'm going to pass these around, and it'll give you an idea. And there's images on both the front and the back of the packet. So I continued this work even after leaving the gallery in 2018. Then COVID struck, and most of the posters dealt with entertainers, bars, restaurants, community events. All those things dried up, or in some cases went away altogether. So the posters disappeared as well. And I was left trying to come up with something else to photograph on the street. And what I eventually came up with was windows with interesting objects in them, and most especially windows with interesting reflections and shadows and so forth on them. I specifically did not consciously try to continue my work with posters into the windows. My practice is always images first and ideas later. And I realized after a little while, though, that there were a lot of similarities. Okay, so you have the glass, which is man-made, you have objects in the windows, which are man-made, but you also get reflections from clouds, you get cars passing by, pedestrians passing by, all of which you add into the composition. And so there were a lot of similarities to the two. And again, just as samples, I'm going to pass this one around, if you would be so kind again. So you can kind of see what I did with some of the windows on Alberta Street and other streets in Portland. So then I got to thinking about other windows that I had taken in the past. And these are some of them. This one and my other image in this show are among other window pictures that I took in the past. And the more I reflected on it, I decided that windows as a theme was sort of like an underground stream of water that was trying to find its way to the surface in my work. And so every so often, a little bit would bubble up here or there, and I would make prints. Sometimes I exhibited another version of this print. And then, they kind of went away, and then after a while again, another little 2 or 3 would bubble up. And I did this many times over the years. And so I got to thinking about all this, and I decided to go back and try to backfill some of the more recent body of work with earlier images. And this one is perhaps the most important, in that I took it in probably circa 1980 in Japan, and it is the very first image I can remember where I intentionally introduced other objects besides the main object in the picture. So the mask, I was taking the picture of the mask on a fairly busy street, and people kept wandering into my picture as I was trying to shoot it. And at first I was irritated, but then I decided to take advantage of it. And so I started incorporating the people into the picture as they walked by. And if you look at my other photos, you'll see that it's somewhat similar. So Why did I shoot this on black and white film? Well, the main reason is that's what I had in my camera. However, in those days, I was doing most of my serious photography in black and white because I could control it, even though I only had a very basic home darkroom. You could get good effects in basic black and white with fairly simple means, much more so than color. Also, monochrome or achromatic works well with subjects that have a slightly eerie feel to them or sense to them. And so this subject matter did. If you use color, it needs to be compatible with the subject and what you're trying to show. If you look at my other black and white image, I don't have an exact color version of that one. However, I do have some that were taken more or less the same time. And they have warm reds, pinks, oranges, yellows in it. Totally different feeling. So, you know, you have to pay particular attention if you're shooting in color with, you know, these types of things. Plus, you can also get, you know, colors that are discordant with the rest of the image. So that's basically a little bit about how this image came about. I have redone it. This is a new version, which I did this year, but I've done several other versions before. And if you have comments or questions later, I'll be happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Hello. I want to start by saying it's been really an honor to be included with all of the artists in this show. I've been amazed at what people can do with black and white. I chose to create 3 distinct works, and this was the most challenging art project I've ever undertaken. It required 2 months of effort, and I'd wake up in the morning and say, I'm not doing this. This isn't going to work. And then I get back to work. So my goal was to break away from the familiar work I'd been doing, and the working in black and white presented unique difficulties throughout the process, and my inner critic was relentless, scrutinizing every day. And I often dreamed about the process, and I'd come up with solutions that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. So the first one I did that I started, this is called Zabuki, and it's an imaginary earth goddess. And she has a wolf down here as her spirit animal, and she's on a wooden pillar. So first I gessoed, I discovered black gesso. What a wonderful product. First I black gessoed the wood, and then I used collage patterned black and white paper on the surface. And then I put the goddess and a lot of birds and animals and a tree and other goddess symbols on the 4 sides. I started off with kind of the black sky as the top of this, and back here it's more of a daylight version. I'll pass this around so you can look at it. So she's here with the wolf at her feet, and then the tree was another challenge. Oh my gosh, it took forever to do that tree because I couldn't get the contrast. You know, you use color as contrast, and if you have only black and white, like I kept trying different things and she wouldn't show up. And it was, these branches were just laying on the table, and I happened to lay the image of her on top of it. Oh, voila, I've got it. So then she became distinct, and then I did, as I said, I did the tree 3 times. And the tree is loaded with, there's an elephant down here, but it's loaded with birds and butterflies and a couple of lemurs. And then on the sides, I put, this is a mask, this is an African mask here, and this is her handmaiden over here. So, and then this little thing down here says, yours is the earth. So I'll pass this around and you can look. It's varnished, so you don't have to worry about getting fingerprints on it or anything. Then my second project is called Curio Cabinet, and this is something I'd always wanted to do, was squares in a collage, so that each square is a different collage. So this is it's divided into, it's 17 small collages, and this was also a challenge with how was I going to do this? What was I going to do? This background up here is a photograph that I took of a moon in Hawaii, So that became the background. This background is also another photograph I took. This is my dog, a photograph of my dog. So I played around with different backgrounds. And another thing I discovered doing this work is transferring images on packing tape, which is an amazing process. And this eye is actually one of those. You put it on packing tape and you let it soak in warm water, and when you pull it off, you have to use laser images, laser print images, but you get a clear version of the thing that you pull off. And this piece here, to me, this looks like a portal to the universe. And this 6-sided piece here was just done in different black and white images. Then the third piece I did is called Living in a Black and White World, and it's a concertina book. I don't know if you've ever played with these. I had not made one of these. It's made out of one piece of vellum. And this was another challenge because I didn't know if the vellum would be stable enough or strong enough, because I gessoed the back, and then the front is collaged written pieces on it. And it was strong enough. I was so surprised, and it held the shape. And another thing I used in here that I discovered is it's called binding tape, and it's made out of linen. And you don't see it when it's made, but it's right here because this is in 2 pieces and it's holding this book together. And that was amazing too, and it folds. So the copies of the photographs, or most of them are over 100 years old, and were taken by my grandmother in the early 1900s when the Kodak camera became available for people to take pictures, and then they'd send them off to be developed. And I didn't want to make an album, although I did put it on black because their albums were black in those days. My purpose was to transform family history into art. So I didn't label these photographs. They're not put in order, but they are. I wanted to show active lives, and that black and white pictures could be very vibrant and show activity. So I've got their old cars. This is my father fishing as a boy. My aunt, this is one of my favorite great aunts, Claire, on horseback here, and they were out camping. And then my great uncle went off to World War I, and there are pictures of him. And here's a picture of my dad with his parents going to World War II, and they're all dressed up. So then the outside of this, my great aunt wrote a book about her family homesteading in South Dakota, again in the early 1900s. They were actually in the same town that my grandmother was in. My grandparents got married in this town. So my great aunt wrote this book. You can get copies if it's out of print, but you can get copies online, and I got one that was in poor condition because I tore it up which is sacrilegious. I tore it up to collage it, and then the pen and ink drawings that are here are from that book. So I was really trying to capture, I called it Living in a Black and White World, and I was trying to capture life, because when I think of those days and I try to think of them in color, I can never really translate those pictures into color, but they are filled with lots of activities. And I can pass this around too. It's coded. So after completing the project, I had a dream in which I was granted 4 more colors. So the project represented a kind of a new phase for me and a new level of my work. I'm fairly new to art, so I ended up being very, very pleased with the results and very surprised that all 3 of the works were accepted in the show. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Peggy, but I represent my artwork that's in the show. They are called neurographic doodles, and I discovered them during the pandemic, and they have been a life-changing experience. They saved my life. They help me on a daily basis. You'll see with the books that are being passed around, I'm a little obsessed. This is my bike helmet. It's a little tight. And the dress also has one of my designs on it. So, what is a neurographic doodle? If you Google it, you'll find that people tend to make images that are representational, and then they color them in. To me, that's too much pressure. And that feels like making art. And neurographic doodles should not feel that way. They should be an escape and a release of whatever you're dealing with. So I have ADHD. I don't know if you could already tell that. So I use them as a way to help my brain like get back to hopefully operating in a neurotypical way instead of neurospicy way. Which I love being neurospicy, but sometimes it's a little prohibitive for me getting some stuff done around the house or in the office. So my neurographic doodles, as you'll see as you look at them, they are a continuous line. I am a big fan of the blind contour drawing and just the, don't lift your pen off the page while you're drawing something. So that's what I do, but I try to do non-representational because that's what most of my mixed media and collage work is. So in a neurographic doodle, what you do is you draw, and anywhere the lines cross, you smooth out those intersections. And that is when the magic happens. When you take the time to go in and start smoothing all those little corners, it like calms those things in your brain that aren't calm, and it helps you like, I don't even know, it's so hard to explain because I've made probably over 500 since like 2020, and I had like a whole show of them. There were so many, I did them all hanging from like a ladder, and those pieces in the back are from that show. And there's moments when I'm making them where I all of a sudden am bawling my eyes out. Like I just don't know where that came from. Other times I start giggling. And you'll see in some of the books I have tried to draw a face. Like, can I make it representational and how does that feel? And I like it because it's a way to stay connected to your art practice without feeling the pressure of having to make art. And then when you're done, it's really freaking cool looking. And I love, it's like a fingerprint. None of the ones I have done, like I have tried to replicate ones because people are like, I really like the ones that look like a fairy wing. Can you make me one? And then I'm like, probably not, but I will try. And it's completely different. You can't repeat them. So I love them. They're the best thing, I think. If you can't afford therapists, try neurographic doodles. And afterwards, if anyone has any questions, I'll be around. Thanks.
Hi folks, I'm Bob Hecht, this is Dale Miller, and we're up here together because, as you'll see, we've collaborated on some pieces, very specifically on Dale's 2 collage pieces that you'll see, and more generally on my photography. These pictures are representative of a series that I did some years ago. I've been a photographer for well over 50 years, and at some point I realized that there were recurring themes and equivalences, if you will, in terms of things that I gravitated to over and over again. Similar forms, patterns, textures, and so that's okay. They're okay. So one day I was reviewing some of my vast archive of pictures, and I hit on these 2. This was a freeway overpass in San Francisco with sharp shadows, and this was a pair of scissors in our kitchen. These were taken over 20 years apart. And I looked at those and I thought, I wonder if there are more of those in my body of work, and I started looking for them, and I wound up with 50 such pairs of those things. Wow. And I said, more generally, we collaborate because we've been together for over 30 years, and she's my first line photo editor and critic, so she sees everything and weighs in on it. This series, not the whole 50 pairs, but a lot of it was published in Lenswork magazine, a nice photography magazine. And I have a few copies, about 10 of them, that I'll put out on the table in the back if anybody's interested in taking those. And I don't think I have anything more to say about mine.
So Bob and I have collaborated on a lot of things, including we had a business together for over 25 years that was video production, and we did all parts together. So we have a very compatible, similar aesthetic. And collage is my passion, and I love all parts of it, including the collecting of things. And sometimes Bob will give me prints of his that don't come out well. There's some glitch with the printer
That
or
hardly
whatever.
ever happens. but-
Hardly ever happens. And he'll offer them to me to cut up and use pieces. And so about 6 months ago, he handed me one, and this abstract, and I looked at it and I thought, oh, I'm going to work right on this. I'm not going to cut it up. So this is how this whole thing started, with us working on photographs together. So this abstract, I put, pieces in here, there, everywhere, and actually submitted it here for a collage exhibit in June, and it hung on the wall over there. And
I should interrupt just to say that in decades earlier, I would have been appalled at the idea of somebody putting stuff on top of my art, desecrating it. But
I had 33 years.
Yeah,
Feel the confidence anyway. So I did this and showed it to him, and he loved it. And so could I have the tree and the... So the next one I'm going to show you was something we actually planned together. Bob found this little branch on our patio, and he brought it in the house, and of course I knew he was going to photograph it. And we planned this whole thing out. So he brought this branch in, which is right here. We laid it on our kitchen island and found the pattern that we wanted in the island to put it over. So the larger one is the photograph, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do with this. This is the first time I've ever had a vision that worked out exactly the way I planned. Then I glued the branch onto the photograph, and then it went into our Christmas ornaments and found these little drops and created tree drops is the name of this. So we had that, and then we knew that there was this black and white exhibit coming, and I thought, well, I'm going to go into the archives and see what else is there. So I've had these little glass bottles that I've been hauling around for years and years, thinking, someday I'll do something with them. And Bob had this photograph of these bottles that he had taken. And I took a look at it and thought, oh, the little glass bottles. So I just glued them on, and as you say, voila.
It worked.
And so this has actually created a direction we're moving in. So we're doing a lot more collaborating. I mean, he's doing things on his own, and I'm creating collages on my own, but this idea of making something together is where we are now.
So I'll make a photograph and she'll say, maybe I could work on that one. So it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, so that's our story.
That's it.
And thank you.
I have two pieces. I don't know if Greg wants to take that other one down, but I have the mask. That one's called Cluttered Mind, and I'm going to read my artist statement first, and then I'll talk about my idea of doing it. Cluttered Mind explores the overwhelming thoughts that come through tension and constraint and chaos. The fluid pouring technique embodies the uncontrollable nature of cluttered thinking and thoughts, flowing in all directions and pooling unexpectedly. The mask functions as both a barrier and a metaphor, as a space of potential clarity against the black and white. The achromatic palette strips away color's distraction, mirroring how overwhelming thoughts drain vibrancy from our inner landscape. This work reflects the contemporary struggle with information overload and the challenge of finding clarity in complexity in our world. What lies beneath that mask that protects us from our beautiful chaos? So my thought, I'm a fluid artist, and I do this other work is not fluid art, but I had this idea of doing fluid art over an image that would create it, to give it a 3D look. So I found a paper mache mask that I glued to the canvas after I did the background. So I did the background first, and I wanted the background to be very simple. And so I made it to almost look like an airbrushed painting on the bottom. And then I actually, after I glued it on and I had everything the way I wanted it, I put the paint into actually a dustpan, believe it or not. And I had the black and white colors and I poured it over the piece. And it worked. And I was really nervous doing it, but it did work. So I had one shot to get it right because I wanted negative space in that piece. So that's how I did it. And I think it almost creates a tribal look too, which I find very interesting. And then this piece is called The Dark Side. The dark side emerged from an exploration between contrasts, both literal and metaphorical. Working exclusively in black and white, I sought to strip away the distractions of color and focus on raw interplay of light and shadow, presence and absence. The mixed media approach allowed me to build layers of texture that speak to the complexity beneath the surface appearance. What began as an investigation into achromatic relationships evolved into something unexpectedly visceral. A piece that resembles an X-ray of a human face, revealing a skeletal architecture that lies under familiar features. This accidental transformation speaks to the painting's central theme, the hidden structures that define us. The achromatic palette becomes a metaphor for seeing beyond superficial beauty or conventional representation, diving into the stark reality of what lies beneath. The textural elements create a tactile quality that invites the viewer to consider not just what they see, but what they might discover if they look deeper. The X-ray-like quality that emerged wasn't planned, but it perfectly captures the work's essence in a glimpse of the dark side of visibility, where beauty is not found in what we present to the world, but the fundamental truths and structure of our being. It's very unsettling and fascinating simultaneously, challenging the viewer to confront beauty in our most basic, unadorned forms. Through this piece, I invite contemplation of our relationship with concealment, asking viewers to discover what is it about ourselves that we can discover when we strip away color, pretense, and surface charm. So anyway, when I painted this piece, I created texture underneath, and I used very light, liquidy, fluid acrylics that I laid on top of this form. And somehow the paint just gathered this way, and I went, oh my God, I'm starting to see an X-ray. And I definitely didn't plan that when I first started the piece, but I got really excited as it was happening when I was working on the canvas, and I knew that's what I wanted it to be. And it was a very unexpected, beautiful thing for me.
Hello, I'm Leigh Radford. I'm a painter and textile artist. This piece originated kind of from my sketchbook practice. I'll kind of pass this around, but one of my first things that I do when I get up in the morning is I fill in a shape of something. Sometimes it's just an intuitive hit, sometimes it's a negative space of shadow or whatever, but I try to kind of capture that moment as I'm kind of starting my day. It started to be a really good habit to develop with, instead of looking at the paper the first thing in the morning and freaking out about everything that's going on. So I found that to be a lot more calming. I usually don't work from a prior sketch. I usually, when I start a project, I kind of just go to my materials and kind of see what happens. And I also mostly work with color. I love working with color. So I figured working on this piece was a bit of a challenge for me because it's so easy for me to revert to working with color, and a lot of color that have to focus just on the black and the white and really focus and think about what I was doing with the composition and the shapes. But I've also found that if I'm resisting, as I did multiple times throughout this process, either completing it and kind of have that same self-talk about, oh, this is dumb, or I don't like it, or whatever. I usually find that you have to keep pushing through those times, because that's usually when you end up getting great value at the end of that, whether you see it at the time that you've completed it or not. Sometimes you see it later. But I have really tried to be more focused also on what I'm getting out of the process, rather than thinking about what's the end result going to be. So with that sketchbook practice of kind of working with an initial shape, I also this spring learned how to do Reiki. And Reiki is a Japanese energy healing technique. And so I was really much more thinking about energy of the body and energy of shapes and how they interact, and kind of maybe what's happening on an energetic level as two forms start to kind of meet. So this is sewn textile. It's done out of cotton and thread. And I just kind of pulled some of my compositions from my sketchbook and then started kind of working with the elements of those and trying to kind of capture something that I felt like was interesting in the relationship between the two forms, and kind of what's happening kind of as they either approach each other or separate. I was interested also in working kind of just with the heavier form on the top. Is this form going to kind of merge down into the one on the bottom, or is the slope of this going to help so that it kind of slides off? It just really got kind of caught up in all the different aspects of where the forms could go in the movement. So, thank you.
Just want to be holding this up for y'all to see. Show you the front first. You can read it. It says Memento. The back says Mori. So as Greg said, I'm Nerissa Eckerson. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. My piece, again, is called Memento Mori, and it's born of a scarf I crocheted for my late husband. His name was Patrick. He died unexpectedly next to me in our bed 10 years ago. It's taken until this season in my life for that experience to synthesize into the visual work I'm undertaking today. So where you see white is what I stitched as the messaging of remembrance into for this show. And for those unfamiliar, Memento Mori is Latin for remember you must die. And so I learned that Roman generals that returned from war would parade through town on chariots aside an enslaved person who would whisper this reminder into their ear to ensure the victory would not go to their head. My grandmother taught me to crochet when I was a teenager, and as I create fiber art to show in a gallery setting, I like to think of it as a type of ancestor veneration, though I am pleased that that particular ancestor is still alive today. I wanted to create this piece to honor Pat's memory, but also to give visibility to the very real fact of life, that death comes for us all. But also the flip side of this is true. Memento vivere, remember to live. I recently had a conversation with a maker of death shrouds that introduced me to the term death illiterate. I think we can all recognize that death remains a taboo subject in Western society, and it's becoming a personal priority of mine to increase my literacy around death and to help others increase theirs too. Thank you all.
So I'm Christopher Luna. I'm primarily a poet, and the visual art that I do is mostly collage. When I saw the open call, I went through, 10 or so years of collages to see if I had anything that was black and white that I wanted to enter into the show. And I didn't really see anything, but I've had a relationship not just with Art at the Cave, but also with Angst Gallery, which used to exist around the corner. And I remembered that when I create pieces for the shows, for the open calls, those seem to be the ones that resonate the best with people, and the only ones that I've ever sold were ones that I created for the theme of the show, whatever it was. So for me, for collage, it's kind of I have a very busy mind. I'm sort of a maximalist in how I approach collage. So but I use collage as a way to sort of calm myself. During the pandemic, I watched Questlove's live streams of DJ sets where he played, rare and popular music, 3 to 5 hour sets, and I would do collage on the table, and it's really what kept me sane. I hope that I get a chance to thank him for that in some way at some point. But what's interesting in terms of that, in terms of sort of calming yourself down and becoming tranquil, is that the thing that takes the longest amount of time is the material gathering. So even though I've perfected sort of speed reading books and magazines when I get them, when you're out as a collage artist, everyone gives you their old books and magazines, which is really great. But you have to learn how to do that quickly. And then I do occasionally pull things that I might read, and so there's piles of those. But it's all about piles and files. So I've got files with really broad categories like men and women, or music, or history. And then when I have a piece that I want to work on, it's about going through the files or the piles, or both, to find things that are potential material. And then you make another smaller pile. And then it's about eliminating things until you get to where you want to be. And something about that entire process is nonverbal in a way that my poetry writing is not, and something about that just kind of helps me to decompress and to calm down and to get into another headspace. And so one of the things I learned from doing this is I have done a lot of collages where I cut out words and put them on the collage, but I guess because I made a decision with this one not to do that, what it sort of showed me was that we can trust that if you recontextualize things, like take a person on a bicycle and put them in outer space, that creates narrative, that there's narrative inherent in collage. If you can sort of trust in that part of the process, you don't need to put words on it to tell people a story or begin to give them a way to engage with it. And so, but one of the things I really like is handwriting on art. I really like Raymond Pettibone, who's a guy who did punk album covers in the 90s, and it would always have a little bit of his handwriting, the art that I saw by Raymond Pettibone. So I'm very comfortable with doing that, but I think I'm going to move away from cutting out words and putting them on collages, because it's a little ransom notey anyway, and I'm a poet, so I can kind of like how I don't buy greeting cards. I don't know about the other writers here, but I don't buy greeting cards that already have words on them, because I can come up with my own words. It's sort of the same idea here. If I am going to apply words, and I could change my mind about this next week, right? But for now, I think I'm going to try to do collage without words, unless I'm compelled to write some poetry or words on it. But in terms of the actual piece, I did the same thing that I did with my poetry, which is I titled it when it was finished, when I felt like it was done. And I ended up titling it Achromatic Prophecy, and using the title of the show as part of the title. I knew when I started working on it, even when I just had a bunch of piles of random black and white stuff, that I wanted to be like a dream-like experience, but that's all I really knew. And so then in terms of process, what I'd like to say to you is that my little mind was blown by seeing a show at Reed College some years ago where I saw a bunch of work by Jess Collins. Jess was the partner of the great poet Robert Duncan, and made a lot of book covers and a lot of flyers for readings, which I also do in collage. And what I learned from seeing that show of Jess's work, and I would really encourage you to look at Jess's work, is this very basic thing of finding a background. It could be a landscape, it could be a cityscape, it could be stars. I really like working with outer space as a background, and then just start putting stuff on it. And as you put things on it, like I said, it's kind of the story comes out of that. One of the issues that came up here that comes up, I think, for a lot of collage artists is what can we do to hide the seams, hide the places where you either tore or cut the paper. And so that was a big, if this coheres for you, I think that's the reason why, is because I paid really close attention to making sure that there were very few places where you could see, oh, this is a cut piece of paper. And that layering is something that hopefully brings it above just the sort of the process being on the surface. So, and what else did I want to say? So the background idea from Jess, there's some land as background, there's some stars as background, and some sky as background. And then you just sort of like start with the land at the bottom and work your way up to the sky. I didn't mess with, the laws of physics. And then there was a great black and white photo that I found of a volcano exploding. I'm sorry, I know people are into volcanoes here, but I don't know which one it was. But so I used the volcano explosion as clouds, but then later when I finished the piece, what I really realized was that it also kind of looks like brain matter, so that's kind of cool. So anyway, those of you that are looking at it, check those things out. I think that's, that's what I have to say about it, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Joy. I've always enjoyed working with living things, drawing people, animals, and I guess I'd consider myself a portrait artist because that's primarily what I work in. Love graphite and charcoal. I love working on pieces that have a lot of detail. I get lost in the details. I lose time in the details. And I think as my piece progresses, the more details I capture, then the subject really starts to come out. I do like to work mostly from photos. This is one of the pieces. I just recently tried working in pan pastels, which is kind of similar to charcoal. And this was my first attempt at a pan pastel. And I felt like, I could draw so much faster than with a pencil tip. He kind of emerged on the paper. And then I did go in with a pastel pencil that I had for the details. And then this guy, he was a graphite. And I really wanted to give the feeling that he was coming up and was gonna boop you with his snoot. So the name of the piece is Snoot. I wanted that 3D effect. I think I've heard a couple of other artists talk about having busy minds and being neurospicy, and that's also me. And I think being able to get lost in these details and just in artwork in general has helped me most of my life. Try to work with what's going on up here. So that's it. Thanks.
Hey everyone, my name's Luca. I use they, them pronouns. I have been an artist for most of my life. I started out as an actor and like a comedian, a performer. And then about 10 years ago, I found collaging. And then maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, I started crocheting. But throughout all of my work, the theme is that I don't follow any pattern and I like never have a plan. I just kind of go for it. So window panes are something that I've been exploring for maybe the last 2 years. I like this medium because it's really, really challenging. You need to figure out like what type of glue is gonna work and isn't gonna show through on the glass. Also working on layering. Generally in my collaging, I just like always have to put glue down and just like go from there. This doesn't really work in this medium because there's a lot of like moving things around, and if you take something off glass, you need to spend a really, really long time cleaning it. So this one was a little bit more of a challenge. And as other people have mentioned, this I created specifically for this art show. I've done, I think, 2 or 3 others here, and I've always just grabbed from what I've made, but this time I wanted to challenge myself and make something specific for it. So when I'm working on a window pane, which I've done a few other ones, I like to find pieces that I keep in my collection. So I know a lot of other collage artists have been talking about like finding something and having it for a really long time. That's what I like to do just in general, and I work with a ton of mixed mediums, main one being collage and crochet. So like this piece, the black piece of crochet is something that I worked on when I was in New York last year for 10 days, just doing some freehand. And then other ones like these little gun girls I've had for maybe like 3 years, and I just have them above my desk, and then I've always been kind of looking for a place for them to live. So it feels really exciting when you find something and it's like the perfect place for it. What I also like about these window panes is it's a lot bigger of a surface than I'm usually working on. Usually I'm doing like bookmarks or 3x5, 6x9 type work. So how I usually approach this type of work is that I'll zoom in really close on a section and I'll work on the details. What I like to do on my window panes is I will take specific images, so like these guys right here, and I'll actually cut them into different layers and then put certain ones on the back and certain ones on the front, so that as you're moving around the space, it looks a little bit different. It's a little bit more three-dimensional. And then as I zoom out and I go to other sections of the collage, I kind of create a different story. So something that's fun about this is that all the magazine pieces that I am using in here date back. I think the latest one I used is 1958. So all of my work is usually really, really dated from things I've gotten from like grandparents and stuff like that. But then all of these fabric pieces and other materials I like to just find throughout my life. So like the stars up here are the back of like a mesh bag that I got some jewelry in from a friend. And then I also like to use mesh to layer on top of other materials to create like more dimension. So this checkered print, I went to the laundry room that is in my apartment and I wanted to find dryer sheets because that's one of my favorite materials to use, but too expensive to buy. So I like to use them after people have discarded them, but I found this black and white checkered that somebody obviously had like a to-go sandwich in, but they had thrown in the trash and I was like, that's perfect. And then I used mesh on another portion of it to create like more of a grayscale for it. So I like to just take things that people otherwise would throw away and not really have life for it and then create new things. So when I'm working on something like this, I do zoom in and I create really small sections, so I create my own stories. So here I feel like I was creating more of just like the man's world, very like hustle and bustle. Up here I have more, there's like a lot of Catholic themes in here and a lot of women and a lot of time and like old photography. But this part of here is my favorite section. I feel like it's a very good kind of like outcast section or clowns or performers, things like that. And so the same as other people have said, I always title my work at the end of it because as I'm zoomed in, I can get kind of lost in that world, but then I zoom out and I find other themes. So I titled this one, The Show Must Go On, because there's obviously a lot of things happening in it. But as I kind of stand back, I can always tell if a piece of work that I've done, if I'm proud of it, because when I look at this, I could come up with 100 reasons or like meanings today, but those are all gonna change next week. So yeah, I'm currently working on expanding my window panes. I'm working on 2 others right now, and then I'm also working on a solo project of creating pieces that go into the identity of being trans, and also exploring trans people and their bodies and how that changes throughout time and society. So that's all I got for you. Thank you.
Hi. I'm Benji Todd. I'm an oil painter, like at least right now, I guess. Today I'm an oil painter. This is slow dancing. It's part of a series I've been doing a lot recently of these ghost figures. I've been doing ghosts for a while. Before this show, then I typically do them in black and white and a lot of blue to show that they are like actual dead figures around like a colorful background. So hearing about this show was a nice challenge because I'm like, oh, if it's all black and white, how do I still get across that they are ghosts or that they're dead? So I'm putting them all in these big black voids And it's not showing on this one, but all the other ghosts I do, they have completely blacked out eyes. Like no highlights or anything, just full black. That in itself is like the one thing that I think still makes these ghosts and not just, naked people. Because where I heard that like the white parts of your eyes and the color is an evolutionary device that we got not specifically for like individual survival, but for community survival. Like you have really white, bright eyes so that other people can see where you're looking in the dark, so you can communicate a whole lot without saying anything. It's a communal survival trait. And since these ghosts aren't surviving, they're dead, they're just existing, it seems like a really lonely existence, and that they are just completely separated from like the life that we're in now. Like life itself is pretty communal. It's kind of a communal sport. They don't need it. They don't need survival. So they don't have that trait anymore. They don't care to see what each other is seeing to communicate in that way. That's the idea behind these ghosts. The reason that this one has its eyes closed is because this is one of the few times that I put two of them together, actually embracing and not so lonely. And then it just felt really bad to leave the eyes open on that one and show that it's still like completely blacked out, because it's a really sad message. Like it's still there. She still has no eyes, but at least now it's covered up and you don't get to see that so much. This one actually could just be two naked people. And it's called slow dancing because even though it's so static and flat and level, like there's no movement in it, I wanted to feel like they are still slowly moving somehow. Like maybe they were slow dancing and it's just come to like such a soft, slow pause that they're just taking a minute before they get back up and dance some more. I didn't prepare anything else to say. If anyone's got a question, I might have time for that. If not, that's it.